The film opens up with a young boy saying goodbye to his mother, who is an actress, though her mother calls her a whore. His mother promises him that one day he'll return to Venice, and then she will come back to him. The grandmother goes on, though, to say that love is irresistible, and that his mother is leaving for love, and the word irresistible is the one that sticks with the boy, whom we can assume is the title character, Casanova. The scene cuts to the boy, now grown up, staring at multiple women. Casanova ends up being intimate with a married woman, hiding in the wardrobe when he hears the husband coming. Casanova is then standing in a public crowd, watching a play about himself, though he doesn't look too pleased by what he's watching. Casanova is then spending his evening speaking to a young woman, who asks him what he's looking for. He's looking for is a moment that will last a lifetime. The woman is unsure if this man is actually Casanova, but ends up spending the night with him. Suddenly, they're interrupted by a knock at the door. Casanova immediately gets dressed and darts out of the room, where he's greeted by many nuns who are clearly infatuated with him. Casanova is that much of a smooth talker that even nuns are falling for him. Casanova desperately searches for an exit, as the Inquisition forces are looking for him. He ends up climbing out of a window, while the Inquisition goes the other way. Casanova ends up running along the rooftops of Venice, though the Inquisition soon sees him and gives chase. He almost ends up falling into a canal, though he just makes it through a window before the Inquisition can reach him. Casanova now finds himself in a university, where a senior member of the university is giving a lecture on why women shouldn't be allowed to study. He tries to make for the exit without being seen, but just then, one of the attendees at the lecture stands up and reveals herself to be a woman. Everyone in the hall is shocked at what they're seeing, a woman in university. He is now intrigued. He puts his wig back on to blend in with the rest of the students, to listen to what this woman has to say. The senior member and the woman go back and forth in relation to women and their intellect. But just then, the Inquisition runs into the hall and chases down Casanova again. This time, Casanova's attempt at fleeing is futile. The Inquisition finally capture him. Casanova is brought before the Inquisitor, where the nun whom he had relations with claims she was bewitched by him, and the Inquisitor sentences him to hang. Just then, the prince barges into the room, and the Inquisitor looks less than happy. The prince takes the Inquisitor to one side and explains that the nun Casanova had relations with is the mistress of a cardinal in Rome. The Inquisitor knows what it would mean if it ever got out that the cardinal's mistress had relations with Casanova, so the cardinal concedes and agrees to let Casanova go. Casanova leaves the Inquisitor's office with the prince, who explains to Casanova that he cannot keep bailing him out of the situations he gets himself into. He has chosen to expel him from Venice for his own good. Casanova, though, replies that he cannot leave Venice, as he is waiting for someone that promised to see him again, which we know is his mother. The prince then gives him an ultimatum, that Casanova can stay in Venice under one condition, if he obtains a good wife. Casanova arrives back at his home, where he is greeted by his assistant, Lupo. Lupo expresses his concern, though Casanova simply replies that he is getting married. Lupo seems unfazed by this news, and Casanova asks him to bring him a fresh change of clothes, as he'll need to go shopping. They go into town and attempt to scout a woman for Casanova to marry, though they are unsuccessful. The scene cuts to a young man staring out of a window at a woman who is in a window across from him, though she's paying no attention to her admirer. It is revealed that the young man is the brother of the woman who interrupted the university senior, and that her name is Francesca. Her brother's name is Giovanni, and they are clearly from a wealthy family. Giovanni laughs as he reads a news headline that calls her a transvestite, after her stunt at the university. Francesca's mother is not happy about this, as she wants no scandals following her family, as they would damage Francesca's marriage prospects. Francesca, however, pleads with her mother that she doesn't want to marry the person she has picked for her in Genoa. Giovanni accuses Francesca of having a secret lover, which she doesn't deny. The young woman who is the object of Giovanni's desire is named Victoria, and Casanova has approached her father in order to ask for her hand in marriage. Victoria's father is reluctant to give his daughter away to Casanova, especially as she's a virgin, though Casanova has his doubts in regards to those claims. Victoria's father is adamant that Victoria has never been with a man, and even claims that not a single impure thought has ever crossed his daughter's mind, while Victoria listens in on the conversation from afar. Casanova again tries to convince Victoria's father that he'll be a loving husband to her, though Victoria's father knows that Casanova's idea of love is sexual. Victoria comes into the garden, but falls, catching her father's attention. As her father is helping her up, Victoria aggressively asks her father for Casanova, claiming she will never be happy without him. Giovanni watches as Casanova kisses Victoria's hand, as the two are now engaged. Giovanni runs towards Casanova, throwing his glove at him, claiming he has sullied his love. Giovanni challenges Casanova to a duel, though Casanova declines, as he has to be on his best behavior if doesn't want to be expelled from Venice. He points out that he was the one struck with the glove, so he has the right to turn down a duel, though Lupo picks up Giovanni's glove and strikes him with it, In doing so, Lupo moves the right to refuse from Casanova to Giovanni, and Giovanni reiterates his desire to duel Casanova. Casanova gives Lupo's name, as he was the one who struck Giovanni. Casanova trains Lupo for his upcoming duel with Giovanni, though realizes that Lupo has no talent for dueling. Casanova agrees to fight Giovanni, though Lupo isn't happy with this. The two of them arrive at where the duel is being held, and Casanova is wearing a mask. Before he can ready himself, a masked fighter charges at Casanova and swings a sword. The masked fighter is likely Francesca, who earlier saw how hopeless of a fighter her brother is. Lupo quickly unmasks the man standing next to him to see that it is Giovanni, who has switched with his sister, who also unmasks. Francesca and Casanova stop their duel, and Casanova is the winner. Francesca and Casanova have a conversation while on horseback, in which Francesca reveals to him that his engagement with the famous virgin, Victoria, is the talk of Venice. Casanova denies that he's the libertine that Francesca accuses him of being, but rather a philosopher. Francesca goes on to state that if a man truly loved her, and her alone, she would love him back. This statement clearly strikes a nerve in Casanova, and he even goes as far as to remember Francesca's name. Casanova is sitting on a couch at home, staring into nothing, and admits to Lupo that he has made a terrible mistake. They go out to see Francesca and see her mother call her and inform her of her fiancé's arrival. Casanova is disappointed to hear that Francesca has a fiancé, to which Lupo reminds him that he is also engaged. Casanova sees Giovanni and his mother drop a merchant's fish, and intervenes to help them. Giovanni isn't happy to see Casanova, as he recalls him stealing Victoria. Casanova decides to help Giovanni win over Victoria, so he can instead focus on his sister. He advises Giovanni to be the flame, and not the moth. He questions Giovanni in regards to his sister, who reveals that Francesca isn't happy with her fiancé, as the two haven't met. He also reveals that he believes she has a secret lover, which captures Casanova's attention. Casanova and Lupo follow Francesca, aiming to observe her meeting her apparent secret lover. Just then, the two of them run into Victoria and her father, who warns Casanova that he does not engage in any social intercourse before the wedding. Elsewhere, the Inquisitor's office has received 127 complaints in regards to Casanova's heresy and fornication. The Inquisitor is informed that the word is starting to spread that Casanova enjoys the protection of the Inquisition, and the Inquisitor furiously denies this. However, the Inquisitor notes that eventually, it'll be their neck or Casanova's. Casanova and Lupo wait for Francesca to exit the building and leave, so they can meet with her secret lover. When they enter the property, they see an old, sick man, and Lupo thinks that Francesca has completely worn him out. Lupo finds some of the man's work and realizes that this person is a writer named Bernardo, the same philosopher Francesca mentioned earlier to Casanova. Casanova fears that this man has not only entered Francesca's head, but her heart also. Casanova makes some notes, and when they arrive back home, he ponders over what he has just learned about Francesca and her secret lover, constantly asking for Lupo's thoughts on the matter. Francesca, back at home, is arguing with her mother in regards to her fiancé. Francesca expresses her annoyance at having to marry, especially a man she's not in love with. Francesca's mother, however, scoffs at the idea of love, but does suggest that maybe once she meets her fiancé, she'll fall in love with him. Francesca's mother, whose name is Andrea, reveals that her family is in debt, though their financial troubles will be erased if Francesca honors her betrothal. The next day, Casanova arrives at a church, and Francesca is also present, and shocked to see him there. Casanova explains that he is there to confess his sins. He runs after Francesca and expresses his sympathies that she's being bartered for financial gain. Francesca still refers to Casanova as Senor Salvator, which is Lupo's name, that he gave to Giovanni when pressured for a duel. Francesca again expresses her disgust with his friend Casanova and his womanizing ways. Casanova defends this and expresses that maybe there are different versions of true love. This strikes a chord with Francesca, though she walks away before Casanova can finish. Francesca arrives at the man's house she visited earlier and questions him in regards to anyone reading her work. The sickly-looking man denies that anyone came to him, and it is revealed that Bernardo Gardi isn't the man writing the philosophical work, but it is Francesca herself, and she's just using Bernardo's name, as her work would be rejected if she tried publishing under her own name. It seems that Casanova unknowingly quoted her own work to her when he mentioned different types of true love. Casanova, with Lupo, arrives at the publishers and sees that the books by Bernardo Gardi are very popular with women. With Lupo's help in being a distraction, Casanova manages to sneak to the back of the publishers and read some of Francesca's unreleased work. Francesca has written that though pets such as cats and dogs are close to women's hearts, what they truly desire are pigs. Casanova takes this information literally, and ends up showing up at Francesca's door with an actual pig on a leash. Francesca's maid informs Casanova that the pig cannot come in, though the animal will, and takes the actual pig from Casanova, closing the door on him. Francesca, however, doesn't keep the pig. She sends it to Bernardo, equipped with a note informing him that she no longer requires his services. Back at Casanova's home, Lupo informs his friend that Francesca's fiancé, whose name is Peprizio, is arriving tonight from Genoa. This man is also rich, much to Casanova's disappointment. Casanova's love rival is wealthy, while he is in debt, 15 lire in debt to be exact, according to Lupo. Though Casanova isn't prepared to give up on winning Francesca's heart, asking Lupo to bring him his second-best suit, Peprizio finally arrives in Venice from Genoa on his boat. Peprizio is an overweight, pompous, wealthy lard merchant who has a self-important aura about him, constantly barking out orders while doing very little work himself. As Peprizio gets off his boat, he is greeted by Casanova and Lupo, who are pretending to work for Francesca's family. Casanova informs Peprizio that the hotel he plans on staying in had to abruptly shut due to a damp problem. Casanova brings Peprizio to his own home, and Peprizio states that he cannot wait to see his betrothed, but will only do so once he makes himself presentable. Meanwhile, the Inquisitor is in his office reading more complaints related to Casanova's antics. Suddenly, a group of men burst into his office, apprehend him, and another man sits in the Inquisitor's seat. The Inquisitor is in shock seeing the face of the man, as if he knows very well who the man is. The man introduces himself as Bishop Pucci, and the Inquisitor can't help but look at him in awe. Pucci relieves the Inquisitor of his duties, informing him that the Pope is unhappy with his work, and that he's being reassigned to the Equatorial region to work with the natives there. Elsewhere, Peprizio asks Casanova how much he, who's still posing as a worker for Francesca's family, paid for his home. Casanova explains that the owner ran out on his debt, and that the home is available to purchase for the amount of the outstanding debt, which is 16 lire. Peprizio has no problem handing Casanova 16 lire, and thus he hustles him out of the money he needs to clear his debts, and extra. Peprizio exits a bath, while Casanova and Lupo go through his chest. Casanova finds a book written by Francesca, under the guise of Bernardo Guardi, in Peprizio's possession. Later, Peprizio gets dressed ready to meet Francesca. Casanova exclaims with excitement that Peprizio has picked up his book, and that he is a writer. Lupo reveals that Casanova writes books in relation to women, and that he goes by the alias Bernardo Guardi. Peprizio is shocked by what he's just heard. Casanova makes him take a solemn vow that he will reveal his identity to no one. Peprizio then begs Casanova to take him under his tutelage, as he fears that he may be rejected by Francesca, who has never seen him. Peprizio promises to pay Casanova any price he wants if he helps him. Casanova confirms he can do it, though it will take time, and would require him to be confined to the house in the meantime. Peprizio, being the gullible fool he is, accepts without hesitation. At Francesca's home, Giovanni is once again staring at Victoria. Francesca and Andrea are patiently waiting for Peprizio's arrival, but are surprised to see that Casanova has arrived at their home instead, who still hasn't corrected them in regards to them referring to him as Senor Salvator. Andrea is confused as to why Casanova is there, as he informs her that he was invited. Casanova then lies and reveals that he is, in actuality, Peprizio from Genoa, and Francesca's fiancé, who is so shocked that she drops a tray. Casanova has tea with Francesca and Andrea, explaining how delighted he is that Francesca decided to wait for him. Francesca knows that something is wrong and gets up from the table, though she is stopped by Casanova, who explains that all he wants is her love, and even quotes a passage from one of Bernardo Guardi's writings. Just then, Pucci arrives at Francesca's home and introduces himself to Andrea. Francesca is confused, as she wants to know what the country's most important inquisitor is doing in Venice. Pucci explains that he has been sent to Venice to stamp out fornication and heresy, though Francesca looks less than impressed. Francesca questions what heresy actually is, and Pucci explains that heresy is whatever he deems heresy, and one person that he's after is the writer, Bernardo Guardi. Francesca quickly runs to Bernardo's home to warn him, though before she can get there, the Inquisition has already apprehended Bernardo. Casanova leaves his home, and before he can get to his destination, he is also taken by Pucci's Inquisition. While sitting in Pucci's office, Casanova is horrified by the sound of Bernardo being tortured. Pucci asks Casanova, assuming he is Peprizio, how well he knows Casanova. Pucci admits that he wasn't being completely truthful at Francesca's home. The truth is, Pucci has come to Venice to apprehend Casanova. Pucci considers Casanova a vile fornicator who spits on the teachings of the church. Pucci offers him the whole lard concession at the Vatican, if only he helps him put away Casanova for good, as he is certain a heretic won't be able to stay away from Venice during the Carnival. Casanova does not hesitate, and agrees to hand him over. Just then, Pucci's assistant Andolini comes into the room to announce that Bernardo Guardi isn't the heretic they're looking for. Pucci is not pleased to hear this. Andolini explains that their prisoner cannot read or write, so cannot possibly be the writer, but instead, someone has been using his name. Casanova runs home, figuring out that Francesca had been writing using Bernardo Guardi's name, and that in fact, she does not have a secret lover. Suddenly, fireworks begin lighting up the sky before they can finish their conversation, and Casanova whispers to himself the word, Carnival. Later that night, Casanova attends the Carnival with Francesca. Elsewhere, Victoria sneaks out of her home to attend the Carnival, without her father's knowledge or permission. At the Carnival, all attendants must greet the prince. Casanova is introduced to the prince as Pepperzio. This annoys the prince, as he is all too aware that Casanova is up to no good using a fake name. Casanova and Francesca meet up with Andrea in the hall, where many people are dancing. Just then, a servant of the prince approaches Casanova and informs him Victoria is outside, waiting for Casanova to call her in. Casanova is surprised at this and darts off, while Francesca is left searching for him. While all this is taking place at Carnival, Giovanni visits a brothel, after a prostitute caught his eye while he was, once again, staring at Victoria from his window. Back at Carnival, Casanova meets Victoria outside of the palace. Unbeknownst to him, Pucci and Andolini are watching him closely, and their suspicions are raised when seeing the man claiming to be Pepperzio, and engaged to Francesca, speaking outside alone to Victoria. Casanova and Victoria go back into the place together and greet the prince again, who is amused at seeing Casanova in a bind. Casanova hurriedly takes Victoria into another room away from Francesca and Andrea, masking his face to avoid being seen. Victoria then demands Casanova find them a room, stating that she cannot wait till they're married. Casanova is taken aback by her aggressiveness, but asks her to stay in the room they're in until he is back. However, once Casanova turns his back, Victoria spots her father in the distance, who has come looking for her, and immediately hides under the table. Casanova is surprised to see that Victoria has suddenly disappeared. But just then, Victoria forcefully pulls him down and attempts to get intimate with him. Just then, Francesca, Andrea, as well as Victoria's father, come and sit at the table Victoria is hiding under, who continues to make Casanova squirm by servicing him under the table. The table begins to shake, and Casanova desperately tries to change the subject, though Francesca ignores him and checks to see a pig under the table, as Victoria left it as a distraction to escape. Pucci and Andolini arrive at Casanova's residence, and Lupo leaps from a window and into the canal before he can be seen. Pucci arrives to see the real Pepperzio sleeping in the living room, dreaming about pigs, and mistakes him for Casanova, even though he finds it difficult that women would be easily seduced by this person. Andolini tries to voice his concerns, though Pucci isn't willing to hear any of them. Pucci and Andolini torture the real Pepperzio and his assistant, and Andolini notes that Pepperzio seems confused. Pucci believes this confusion is the result of fornication on a mass scale. Pepperzio asks his assistant to confirm his identity, but unfortunately for him, his assistant is gagged. However, Pepperzio's assistant manages to hand a piece of paper to Andolini, who then confirms that Pepperzio is indeed who he says he is, as the paper is Pepperzio's business logo, a portrait of himself with his name. Pucci apologizes to Pepperzio for ignoring him, but then asks him from whom he's renting the house he's staying at. Pepperzio tells them that he's renting from Bernardo Gardi, the name Casanova told him, which shocks both Pucci and Andolini, as Bernardo is in their custody. Pucci and Andolini both arrive at the conclusion that Casanova is Bernardo Gardi. Pucci arrives at the Carnival ball, angrily telling the prince that he is in Venice to arrest the heretic Casanova. The prince, however, isn't impressed, as he states that Casanova's slate has been wiped clean due to being engaged to the Virgin Victoria, and that he is under his protection. Pucci angrily replies that Venice's safety is up to the Vatican, and then storms off. More trouble arrives at the ball for Casanova, as the real Pepperzio enters and loudly announces himself. Andrea is shocked at what she's hearing, and Casanova attempts to hide himself from almost everyone at this point. Andrea introduces herself to Pepperzio, and they are both taken aback by the other. Pepperzio mistakes her for Francesca and notes how beautiful she is, to which Andrea almost faints, as she finds Pepperzio attractive. Pucci interrupts their conversation and informs Andrea that her daughter has been duped by Casanova, and before he can utter another word, Pepperzio picks Pucci up by one hand and chokes him, while instructing him to stop interrupting. Casanova finds Francesca and takes her to the docks to get a closer look at the fireworks. There, Casanova has a hot air balloon waiting, which he and Francesca take off in. The crowds watch the balloon ascend high in the night sky in awe, while Pucci is appalled, calling it witchcraft. Andolini attempts to correct Pucci by explaining the science behind a hot air balloon, though one look from Pucci, and he too states that this is witchcraft. Casanova and Francesca fly over Venice, and someone in the crowd says that Casanova is with his new fiancée. Victoria, standing watching the balloon with her father, hears this, sees Casanova with another woman, and cries out in horror. Andrea is standing with Pepperzio as they both watch Francesca fly off with Casanova. Andrea notes that she can't remember the last time she saw Francesca look so happy, and that it looks like Pepperzio is now a free man. Pepperzio, though, doesn't seem to be fazed, as he reaches for Andrea, and the pair hold hands. Francesca is delighted, and asks Casanova why he didn't tell her he was her betrothed the first time they met. Casanova replies with a question of his own, and asks her why she never told him that she's Bernardo Guardi, which renders Francesca speechless. Casanova informs her that he has every intention to keep her secret, and then confesses his love to Francesca. Francesca turns around and faces him, only saying that he was at the university debate, which Casanova is hesitant to admit. Casanova tries to convince Francesca that his reason to hide his identity was honest. However, just then Francesca spots a sign with the real Paprizio's logo, and his face on it. Casanova rolls his eyes and sighs, and Francesca, now unhappy, asks Casanova if he is Paprizio. Casanova says nothing, but just shakes his head in silence. Francesca asks him who he really is. Casanova takes a moment and says his name is Giacomo Casanova. Francesca looks at Casanova in disgust, declaring that she writes against everything he stands for. Casanova notes that was only the case before she met him. Francesca picks up a wine bottle and smashes it in the balloon's flame, and as a result, they hurtle towards the ground. While Francesca remarks that she enjoyed Casanova better with his masks, and she's unsure who he even is, as he's assumed so many identities recently. Francesca asks him, how dare he confess his love to her? She thought Salvatore was a gentleman, Paprizio was promising. But Casanova, she despises. The balloon eventually crashes to the ground, and Casanova and Francesca both exit. As a crowd gathers around the crash site, suddenly they're surrounded by Pucci and his Inquisition, and Pucci apprehends Casanova. Pucci accuses Casanova of being a heretic, a fornicator, and also a coward, for hiding behind the name of another. Pucci also accuses Casanova of being Bernardo Guardi, which shocks Francesca, who is about to own up to being Bernardo, though is stopped by Casanova, who accepts the accusation of being the writer. The Inquisition escorts Casanova away and locks him away in a cell. Later that night, Victoria meets with Pucci and informs him that she would like to speak to him. Victoria falsely accuses Casanova of taking her virginity by force, though this is her way of taking her revenge on Casanova for abandoning her. However, Pucci is delighted to hear this, as he believes this is the testimony he needs to hang Casanova once and for all. Pucci promises Victoria that he will keep her reputation intact, and even assures her that the Catholic Church is capable of her reinstating her virgin status, but if only she agrees to testify against Casanova. Francesca, back at home, contemplates the first conversation she had with the man revealed to be Casanova. She remembers admitting that if a man ever loved her and only her, she would love him back forever. Francesca walks over to her window to see her mother sitting on a boat in the canal with Paprizio, kissing each other as other boats pass them. Francesca begins thinking, which leads to her writing. Meanwhile, Victoria is walking home alone. She passes the brothel which Giovanni is just leaving, surrounded by prostitutes. Victoria stops Giovanni, surprised that he's the boy in the window. Giovanni greets Victoria, though he feels ashamed as the prostitutes sing his praises. However, Victoria smiles at him. Giovanni apologizes, admitting to Victoria that he's loved her for years, and Victoria asks why he didn't say anything. Some time later, Casanova is in shackles, tried before a court that consists of high-ranking officials, including the prince and Pucci. Casanova's defense is a person named Dr. Giordano, whom Casanova immediately recognizes as Francesca in disguise. Dr. Giordano tells the court that this is a case of mistaken identity, much to Pucci's outrage. Dr. Giordano explains that Casanova is not Bernardo Guardi, which Casanova denies and claims that he is, though Dr. Giordano explains to the court that Casanova is trying to protect someone. Dr. Giordano tells the court that Casanova is trying to protect the woman that loves him. Casanova, though, once again confesses to being Bernardo Guardi, much to Pucci's delight. Dr. Giordano asks the prince if all that is required to convict him is a confession, and the prince admits that it is. Francesca then resorts to revealing herself in front of everyone present, which includes her mother and brother, and confesses to writing of all Bernardo Guardi's work. The prince is delighted and immediately orders Casanova's release, though Pucci stops this, stating that Casanova has still confessed to the crimes of heresy, adultery, fornication, and violating virgins, and as he says this, he pulls Victoria up by the arm. Victoria, however, admits she lied, and is then pulled back by her father. Pucci has lost his ace, though he isn't going to give up, and is given a file by Andolini containing the 127 testimonies against Casanova. Pucci declares that there is only one verdict, that Casanova is guilty, and that he should be sentenced to hang, and so should Francesca, for being the person behind Bernardo Guardi. Casanova and Francesca are both taken to the gallows, where they are to be hung for their crimes together, in front of the people of Venice. Casanova and Francesca look at each other for a brief moment, but then shut their eyes, as they don't want to see the other in their final moments. Pucci decides to proceed with the execution even though the cardinal hasn't arrived. Just as Pucci is about to give the order, a carriage rushes through the crowd, and out steps the cardinal and his nurse, who is wearing a veil. The cardinal sits in a golden chair next to Pucci, who informs him a heretic named Casanova is set to be executed right away. The cardinal stands up and announces that today is the Pope's birthday, and as a result, everyone set to be executed will receive a pardon in his honor. The cardinal orders the prisoners to be freed while Pucci scrambles to stop him, as the crowd erupts into cheers. Pucci watches on, devastated, as Casanova and Francesca are released. The cardinal commands both Casanova and Francesca to get into his coach, and that they are leaving for his country house. The cardinal's nurse approaches Casanova and lifts her veil, which stuns Casanova into silence, as the nurse is none other than his mother. The same mother who promised to meet him again, if he ever arrived in Venice one day. Casanova's mother apologizes that she's late, and Casanova doesn't reply, still stunned into silence. Casanova's mother introduces him to the man she loves, the actor who is pretending to be the cardinal. Just as they're making their way back to the coach, a child loudly shouts that it's been freshly painted, and that it says the words, "Theater Troupe" underneath. Suddenly another carriage speeds into the square, and its riders announce that the real cardinal has arrived. Pucci is furious, jolting out of his seat and ordering his men to arrest the imposters. Casanova and Francesca fight their way through the crowd and end up riding the horses pulling the coach out of the square, cheered by the crowd as they escape, with Lupo hanging on at the back. The coach races through the streets of Venice, with Andrea, Peprizio, Giovanni, and Victoria also part of the escaping group. The coach almost falls into the canal, but is stopped just in time as Peprizio announces that they can escape by getting on his barge. The group engages in a fight with the Inquisition, easily overpowers them, and ends up getting on the barge, though Victoria is stopped by her father. Casanova arrives with the group, however, he informs them that he is unable to go with them, as the Inquisition will never leave them alone if he part of their group. Giovanni has the idea that they won't follow them, if they believe that Casanova is still in Venice. Giovanni offers to stay and pose as Casanova, so the rest of them can get away, and so he can marry Victoria. Lupo also decides to stay, much to Casanova's disappointment. Pucci finally arrives, filled with rage that Casanova has gotten away, but orders his men to chase the already out-of-reach barge anyway. Once Peprizio's barge escapes Venice, Casanova sits with his mother, who reiterates her promise that she would come back for him one day. Casanova smiles and hugs his mother, still speechless that he's been reunited with her. In the closing scene, an elderly Giovanni details his life after the events that unfolded. Giovanni lived happily with Victoria after they were married, though not together, as Giovanni became Casanova in more ways than one, stating that he added many worthy chapters to the legend. He also states that he kept the secret of the true love of the man who was Casanova.